we will get started with this evening's wonderful panel discussing changing the game and trans inclusion in sport, hosted by Team DC. So thanks so much for being here. Our plan is to speak with our panelists for the first chunk of this hour and then open it up to y'all for questions. If you've got questions in the meantime, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. Hoping to leave some time at the end for questions from you all. So if you've got them, certainly share them. In the meantime, I hope everyone's sitting in front of some AC or a fan or shorts. All right, and Mike, whenever you want to go ahead and start streaming, we're going to be everywhere. What a fun looking panel too. Everyone like brought their A game. We've got some shirts happening. We've got a tapestry behind Sasha. It's great. All right. Well, people can join us as they may. We'll keep an eye on the waiting room. So if you've got friends that want to join this, go ahead and share the link. We'll be here for the next hour or so. I'm going to pitch it over to Laura. Take it from here.
Hi, thanks, Shane. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many happy looking faces. I'm so excited to see you guys tonight, and I'm so grateful that you took some time out of your Monday to join us. I am Laura Frere. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Vice President of Team DC. I hope you all know everything that Team DC does already, but just in case you don't, I encourage you to go over to teamdc.org and check us out when you have some time. Not right now, because you're kind of busy, but we have been celebrating Pride Week for the last 7 days, and we have all kinds of fantastic content up on teamdc.org that you can go check out. Also, please check out our silent auction fundraiser, which is also available on teamdc.org. You can also find our fundraiser by texting Pride Week 2021 to 855-202-2100. You can bid on all kinds of great sports memorabilia and tickets from the Washington Nationals, the Capitals, the Mystics, DC United, Old Glory Rugby, all kinds of great stuff. So please do check all of that out. And I do not want to waste any more of your time because we are so honored to have an amazing group of trans activists here tonight to talk to you. And they are smarter and better people than I am. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to introduce you to Shane Diamond, who is the impact coordinator for the new Hulu original documentary film, Changing the Game. And he will introduce you to all the other wonderful people that are going to talk to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, for bringing it all together, hosting us here tonight, and for introducing certainly me to the great work that Team DC is doing. So I'm really honored to be a part of this evening. I'm honored to be able to introduce this film and this panel of transgender advocates, experts, and most importantly, real life trans people for what we know will be a meaningful and impactful conversation tonight about changing the game and transgender participation in sports. Emmy award-winning filmmaker Michael Barnett's urgent and subsuming sports documentary illuminates what many have called the civil rights issue of our time, transgender inclusion in sports. Changing the Game takes us into the lives of three high school student athletes at all different stages of their athletic seasons, personal lives, and unique paths as transgender teens. Their stories span across the US, from Sarah, a skier and teen policymaker in New Hampshire, to Andrea, a track star in Connecticut, openly competing on the girls' track team, and Mac Beggs, who made headlines when he became the Texas state champion in girls wrestling as a boy. Changing the Game made its streaming premiere on June 1st as a Hulu original documentary and is now available nationwide. Critics and audiences are raving about the film's ability to invite viewers into this intensifying conversation, illuminating the realities that these transgender teens face and the communities affected. Today's conversation and open Q&A afterward will give you an opportunity to hear from trans athletes in the film, national policy leaders, and local heroes to learn more about what we can each do in our own families, communities, and states to be better allies to transgender kids. Joining us tonight are Ann Lieberman, the Director of Policy and Programs at Athlete Ally. Hi, Ann. Rodrigo Hang-Ledinen, the Deputy Executive Director for the National Center for Transgender Equality, or NCTE. Hey, Rodrigo. Sasha Bookert, a senior attorney at the Washington, D.C. office of Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest organization dedicated to advancing the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, and individuals living with HIV. Hey, Sasha. Ava Banach, an immigration attorney and founding partner of Banach Callipy, youth baseball coach, and the recipient of Team DC's 2021 Horizon Award, given annually to an educator or coach who advocates on behalf of the LGBTQ community. Congratulations on that honor, Ava, and we're so glad to have you here tonight. And of course, Andrea Yearwood, trans athlete, total rock star, and film subject. What's up, Andrea? And thank you all so much for being here with us in community tonight. So let's dive right in. Changing the Game is such a powerful film because it centers the stories and lives of trans youth in ways that we don't typically see or hear, namely coming from trans youth. And as one of the national policy experts on this, can you share a bit about this film and why this conversation is so pressing right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shane. And hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. First of all, if you haven't had an opportunity to see the film, you have to watch it immediately. Run, don't walk. Download a free trial of Hulu for 2 weeks. The film is absolutely incredible. I'm just so thrilled that it's finally on a streaming platform. I wished during this entire legislative session that this film was available on Hulu so we could show it to lawmakers across the country, because this has been, without exaggeration, the worst, and it continues, legislative session for LGBTQI plus folks in the history of this country. We, Athlete Ally and many of my colleagues on this call have been working to fight over 300 bills across the country targeting LGBTQ plus folks, with a third of those targeting trans people and really trans kids in either the sports space, so what we call transgender athlete bans, banning trans kids from being able to play sports with their friends, or medical care bans, essentially banning trans kids from accessing life-saving and affirming healthcare. And right now we have 9 states. Florida became the 9th to pass legislation or issue executive orders banning trans kids from playing sports with their friends. And when we talk about how we got here, it depends how far we want to go back. But I think, the important thing for you all to know who are entering this conversation is, essentially, since trans people have been visible, there have been attempts by lawmakers to silence us and remove us from public life. And we saw that in 2015 and 2016 when bathroom bans swept the country, and we're seeing another familiar version of that fear-mongering and hatred today in the form of these athlete bans and medical care bans. And sports is such an important part of a young person's life, and having access to sport and being able to participate on a team with your friends. And I know from my personal experience, I would not be here today if I wasn't able to participate in sports. And we know the benefits of participation in sports in terms of mental health impacts. The Trevor Project just released a study on LGBTQ plus youth in sport. And one of the many important stats we have in that report is that when trans kids have access to affirming spaces at school, like a sports team, that they're 25% less likely to report a suicide attempt within a year. So we know that sports and affirming spaces are literally life-saving for kids. And I think we see that through this film. And we also see an incredible amount of joy and friendship and a narrative that we don't get to see. And that's also why I love that the film allows Andrea and Terry and Mac and Sarah Rose the ability to tell the complexity and beauty of their stories in their lives.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Sasha, I saw you nodding along. Was there something you wanted to add along to that?
I mean, there's quite a bit. I mean, it's been a really, really difficult year, but I think I am going to stop, and I would really love to hear from Andrea.
Andrea, one of the things that I really wanted to ask you is really about your participation in the film and like what drew you to playing sports and what kept you running.
Yeah, so I guess, well, throughout my life and throughout kind of my childhood, my parents have always been very encouraging about us to like playing sports, and kind of every day after school we had to be doing something like with athletic wise. So I mean, through my childhood, I'd always done sports. I swam, I danced, and like I had done soccer at one point. And I got to middle school, and then I found out, track existed. I thought, oh, I really want to try this. It sounds like a really cool sport. So then I did it, but I think I really got into it in high school, and that's when like I was like, okay, like this is my sport now, and I just really started to enjoy it, and I got really well like in my each individual, I guess, events. But yeah, no, it was really fun. And I mean, obviously, my teammates and my friends had also had a big impact on my overall experience within high school. And I guess really they were the ones to kind of help me keep going with the sport and help me continue to run just because, I mean, that's really all that sport is about, is just having fun with your friends and getting and like learning those teamwork skills. So just, I mean, having fun with them, that's all I really wanted to do. And I just continue to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. And we see that in the film as well. You touch on building community and having fun and this joy that we get in sports. Rodrigo, one of the things that NCTE is most known for are the comprehensive health surveys that are certainly quoted often. What do we know about the health and safety ramifications behind some of this legislation, or of some of this legislation being introduced to exclude transgender youth from sport, even if they don't pass?
Yeah, well, basically what we know is that all of these kinds of attacks on trans youth create an unsafe environment in the schools, regardless of whether an individual trans young person is playing on a sports team or not. The survey that you mentioned is called the US Trans Survey. It's a survey we do every 5 years and it's the largest and most comprehensive study of trans people's experiences. Now, I will do a quick plug here that we're getting ready to launch it again next year. We were going to do it in 2020, but this little thing called COVID happened. So, threw us for a little bit of a loop. But now we're back on track to get it out next year. So, side note, keep an eye out for that. If you are trans or you know anyone who is, which I'm betting you do if you're tuning into this panel right now, please encourage your friends or yourself to take our pledge in the fall. And then we'll send you a reminder when it's survey time in February next year. But anyway, this is the biggest study of trans people's experiences, and we have found really pervasive discrimination. The top finding is that 77%, that's over 3 out of every 4 trans young people, are experience harassment in schools, whether that's verbal harassment or outright physical assault, or anything in between. And if you look at the study, you see specific numbers for all of those things. But that is over 3 out of every 4 trans young people feeling unsafe at school. I mean, that is inexcusable. And it's really important to remember that anytime a state runs one of these attacks, like a sports bill, it sends the message that trans people don't belong. Even Shane, like you said, even if the bill doesn't pass, there is still damage in kind of getting that tone out there that trans people, and especially trans youth, are subject to debate. So we see this kind of hostility go up in K through 12 schools, again, even if that individual young person isn't even playing on a sports team. So it's really, really important that everyone who supports trans athletes speak out about it and be really proactive about sharing your point of view and stand up for trans young people if you hear someone debating these sports bills, because you never know who else needs to hear that message. And you never know what kind of difference you could make by just setting the tone and getting across that this is about just treating people with respect. And especially when it comes to youth issues, for those of us who are adults, we are at our best when we are helping young people to thrive and to learn, not putting a target on their back.
That was wonderful and so succinct. Can I make that my ringtone? That was amazing. Great. You talk about, you just mentioned participation and being part of something and letting trans kids belong. We also have such an incredible honor to have a trans coach with us. Ava, we talk so much about what it means to be a trans kid who belongs, but when we talk about visibility and showing kids that they can be trans people, trans athletes, trans happy adults, how does being out and visible help you create an inclusive team culture and climate for your players?
I wish it were so simple, but I think there is something to it. Anybody who believes the myth that somehow trans male to female athletes are going to have an advantage has never seen me play women's baseball. I could strike out just the same. Um, the the I run DC Girls Baseball. We are a program to support girls who want to play baseball. When you meet a girl who plays baseball, you're per se meeting a badass because they've rejected all the ideas about what girls ought to do. Girls are supposed to play softball. Fine, softball's a great sport. If anybody's watching the college softball World Series, it's outstanding athletes. But there is no, they didn't create a separate sport for basketball or soccer or track. Women run the same races that men run. And so when you meet girls who play baseball, they're a group of girls that are automatically self-selected. And I don't go around waving my transness. I'm just me. But at 6'3", it's kind of hard not to. And what I've found is that kids can sniff out authenticity and inauthenticity a mile away. And if you're giving them garbage, they know it. If you're being yourself, they will let their guard down and they will be themselves. Now, the sort of downside of all this is that I've lost 3 players to gender transitions. I had a pretty good shortstop, and now I need to find someone else. For some reason, I'm not making it up in equivalent gender transitions in the other direction. Again, if we can find a 6'3" shortstop from my 19U team, that would be a good start. But a lot of our kids identify as somewhere along the LGBTQ spectrum, and I'll be, for all the labels that we like to put at our, in our 40s and 30s, those of us who are on this panel, maybe some are younger than that, teenagers and the younger ones, they don't care at all. They take your labels and they spit on them. They all have some sort of identity that is entirely their own, and they reject almost all labels. And it's such a liberating thing to see among kids who it's okay. That's who they are. And that's their mindset. So it's done much more for me than I ever could have done for them.
Thank you so much, Ava. And it sounds like they get to shed all of those labels and for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, just be a baseball player. And what an incredible gift that is. Do you think that folks are, girls and young women are seeking out your team because of that ability and that culture you've created where they can shed some of these labels?
Yes, I do. I don't think there's any other explanation for the numbers. But, they come to us because there is something about being on the girls' team that means something to them. That being a part of a group of girls who play baseball is somehow special and different. And again, why, if it weren't, why would there be girls soccer teams? Why would girls move over to girls soccer teams at 10 or 11 when they could easily play with boys? There is a certain camaraderie that exists, and they have to survive in a heavily male world of baseball. Because look, you're not going to get all the baseball time you're gonna need playing with DC girls baseball. They're all on little league, travel, rec, high school teams, and so coming to us is sort of it's a respite. It's a place to sort of like you put it, Shane, just be ball players.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I'm so grateful that exists, that you've created that in the DC area. And that leads me to my next question, and such a great tie-in. Two of the subplots that we hear so much in the film. And again, if you haven't had a chance to yet see Changing the Game, it is on Hulu. You can watch it right after this, grab some dinner, sit down, have a nosh, watch the film, or watch it tomorrow. It's gonna be there. But one of the things that I love in the film so much is that it talks about trans joy and resilience, and of course the impact of allyship. Having supportive family and loving friends, two narratives that are often missing from this national conversation where trans kids are being vilified, traumatized, and politicized. So I want to talk about trans joy. We have a panel of trans people. What are you looking forward to? What future are you hopeful for? What are you hoping to achieve for trans people, even for your own trans personness? And Andrea, I would love to start with you. What does trans joy look like for you? What are you hopeful for?
I guess I'm just more hopeful, I guess, for us or the trans community to be able to live in a space, in a world, that doesn't constantly question our transness and constantly question like who we are or our position within certain spaces. I just hope that, with more information, more conversation about the trans community, with this documentary coming out and hopefully others soon, that people just learn more, kind of open their minds and open their eyes, to who we are as trans people. And then hopefully with that information, kind of share and continue to support and accept us, as they should.
And you absolutely do that in the film and in your daily life. Thank you so much for that. To the rest of the panel, what does trans joy look like for you? Sasha, I would love to hear, what does this look like in the work that you do? What's your joy? What do you hope for?
Well, it's been a difficult year, so but I think that in piggybacking on what Andrea said, I think that part of what we've seen in the last year, as difficult as it's been, is a lot of folks, a lot of allies standing up and going to provide testimony in person at different state legislatures. There was a video of a father of a trans girl in Missouri that just made me break down in tears. If you haven't seen it, go find it, because it's really, really moving. And we've seen that replicated all across the country this year, and people having really difficult conversations, in support of trans people. So, I do believe that first they ignore you, and then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. And that's where we are. We're in the fight, and we got to keep fighting. What gives me joy is my community. I love trans people, I love non-binary people so much. So yeah, I just appreciate being with you, and every day is a joy.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else? What's bringing you trans joy? What are you looking forward to?
I can jump in. Oh, sorry, Rico, do you want to go? Okay, mine's brief-ish. I was just talking to some friends about this. Pride Month, for many of us who work in the space, is always very, very busy. And one of the things that I found really amazing about the kinds of trainings that we're doing this year and the panels, it's 90, actually maybe 100% of them are about trans inclusion and trans identity and experience. And we're talking, from panels like this one to panels at major corporations like Procter and Gamble, who basically have done a series of events with trans athletes and on trans inclusion in sports. And so I have a lot of hope because I see many more organizations wanting to have intentional conversations about trans inclusion in sport. And as somebody who's a community organizer at heart, I really believe in the power of the one-to-one conversations and the real education focus of so many of these panels. And I do think, Sasha, to your point, that we're fighting now, but we're gearing up for a win because so many people really want to be allies and want to help in this fight. And so that brings me so much joy and so much hope in what has been a really devastating session. On the other hand, we're fighting bills in over 30 states and we're beating back the majority of them. So that also, I'm trying to also keep that in perspective.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, Rigo, jump in.
Sure. I mean, I'm really looking forward to winning. And to echo what Sasha and Anne kind of got at a bit there, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time and a matter of us staying in the fight. Now, there is going to be and already has been damage in the meantime. So I don't mean to minimize the harm of what's going on now, but I do want to give us some hope because I think that when we're fighting all of these attacks on trans youth, it can sometimes get demoralizing and feel like there's not a point. And I think it's, at times like that, when it can feel like defeat already, it's can be helpful, at least for me, to remember that we've been here before and come out the other side of it. It was not that long ago that we were facing similarly intense and mean attacks on trans people under the guise of bathroom bans. Now that's mostly in the rearview mirror. That's mostly behind us. That when we were in the middle of that, it seemed like we were never going to get out of it. It seemed like there was no hope, but we kept fighting and we kept fighting and we kept fighting. And eventually enough people in the public kind of realized that this was a bunch of nonsense and realized that there was nothing to be scared of with this is just a trans person trying to live our daily lives out in the world. So I really do think that because we are in the right, it is a matter of time until we win on this. I mean, trans people are coming out at earlier and earlier ages, and we're coming out to more and more people in our lives. And when we do that, some people reject us, but a lot of people take it as a moment to realize that, trans people are not some boogeyman under the bed. We're like their neighbors and their family and their friends. And that's a real light bulb moment for a lot of people. So I think that history is on our side, momentum is on our side. The more that we keep coming out and the more that we keep fighting, the more that we will win this thing. So I like to think that if this was a movie, we're in that montage now where like they show us straighten up and you're like, what's going to happen? But like, you kind of know they're going to win at the end. I think that's where we're at.
I love that so much. Thank you, Rigo. Ava, did you want to jump in? What's bringing you trans joy?
The kids.
The kids.
The kids. They're so far ahead of us. They get it so much better. They understand it. They roll with it. You should. I want to put a shout out that Alex Benot's right in the middle is my 15-year-old son. So if you can turn on the camera for a second, Alex, and wave, everybody would like that.
I love it. See if I can find him.
There he is. The kids obviously are the inspiration because they're ready. They understand. They see it among their friends. They ask the questions among themselves. When I came out as trans, it was like this earthquake in my community, and I live in Chevy Chase, DC, so everybody was tripping all over themselves to be understanding and loving and supporting. And I know that's not typical, but it caused a lot of people to start looking at their own lives and thinking, what is it? who am I? Where am I going? I have to say, I think, quite a few divorces came out of it, but also people stopped drinking and uh, people changed their lives. And I'm not going to put it all on me, but I learned a lot about my community in this whole process. And I became a safe person to reveal stuff to that people felt was um, somehow shameful. So, uh, that deepening connection that I've been able to have with the people around me. I was already a baseball coach. And of course, there was tremendous social pressure. Nobody would think about pulling their kid from my team because you'd be a pariah in Chevy Chase.
Well, we're grateful that you've got that team. You're doing so much work. And one of the through lines that I'm hearing is allyship, is building community, is fighting, is being, as you said, Ava, the support, the listener, being the one person that someone can talk to. Sasha, I want to pivot to you a little bit. We've talked previously that a number of states, including most recently Florida, have banned trans youth from playing sports with their peers. What does this mean for trans youth in those states? And what are the legal challenges right now?
Yeah, I mean, Rodrigo, especially, and everybody in the panel has touched on this already, so I won't go deep, but I think it's really important to repeat, that this is, even if these bills don't move forward and become law, they're harmful in the messages they send, and where they are passed. Yeah, it has a devastating impact on, first of all, it prohibits them from participating, but as, Rodrigo mentioned already, the rates of bullying and harassment and discrimination that trans kids already experience is just exacerbated by these laws because it puts the spotlight on them. And it denies them the participation that we're talking about, the joys of sport, I mean, I've learned so, I'm still learning. I learn something every time I go out onto a field, and people are always teaching me. There's mentorship, there's discipline, there's teamwork, there's cooperation, all of those things that come with sports, the social interaction, especially, and Andrea can speak to this more than I can, obviously, but that unique opportunity you have at that age to bond with your peers is a once in a lifetime experience. And that's what they're trying to take away from these kids. So it's just absolutely reprehensible that, that this kind of legislation is being introduced by the far right. And I think that it's also important to point out that, this isn't just about trans kids, this heightened scrutiny. We've seen this with the bathroom ban bills. When these laws or bills are introduced, they inevitably end up targeting anybody that doesn't conform with gender stereotypes. And I know this is part of the far right's plan to gender police everybody until they're, into cookie cutter ideas about what they believe is a man and a woman. But it's really dangerous, and the impact, and I'm sure we're going to see that impact. So I just wanted to make those points, that about the benefits of participation and the harms to trans kids. But yeah, heck yeah, we're gonna clap back. We've been doing this since 1973. Lambda legal, and we're not going to sit and let these laws go into place and have trans kids be harmed. So yeah, we're definitely looking at all options. The courts have been so infected by Trump judges. You have to be a little strategic in deciding where you're going to file lawsuits. But we are going to respond, and we have responded already. 2 weeks ago, we filed a case in West Virginia, which is one of the states that implemented one of these bans. And we're looking closely at Florida and other states. So yeah, we're going to definitely respond. And the arguments that are being raised, as Anne already pointed out, and others, are completely speculative. These legislators are asked all across the country, can you name one trans athlete in your state? No, and they always, so they repeatedly, they have no example. So it's a solution in search of a problem. There was a study done by the Center for American Progress a few months ago that just went really deep and looked at, states that have inclusive policies, which have been in place, by the way, for decades. There's over 60,000 trans kids participating every day, losing everybody every day, and nobody cares, but that's not a story, no. But the point I was trying to make is that there's been no decline in the amount of women's participation where there have been inclusive policies. In fact, the opposite is true. There's been increases in women's participation where trans people are able to participate in accordance with their gender identity. So all that to say, yeah, it's just an absolutely reprehensible, thing that's happening, and the attack on trans kids. We all get that this is part of the political landscape and it's something we're going to deal with, but the harm is absolutely terrible. But we're going to win, and I'm proud to be part of this with you all, and hopefully sooner than later.
I love that, Sasha. Thank you. I have pom-poms behind me for other things, and I just wanted to pull out the pom-poms and cheer. I'm so fired up that you're fighting back and you're at the helm and you're excited and ready to do it. This is exactly what we need.
And can I just add on to that? It's definitely it's a team effort. It's Andrea. It's people that were willing to stand up and say no, or to be themselves. It's not just a few lawyers. I will say too, though, it is exciting to be part of the legal community and watch the growing number of trans and non-binary folks in the legal community that are fighting these fights. It's really like Chase and so many other wonderful folks. So it's just really, so it's a team effort.
Team effort, absolutely. But it's nice to see someone who's leading many of these charges, fired up and excited about it. And your enthusiasm is contagious to get us all more involved. Speaking of getting more involved, Rigo, protections for transgender Americans, as we've seen and heard, is a patchwork of policies at best. What would national non-discrimination protections look like for transgender people, and how far away from that are we?
Well, the bottom line is that we need to pass the Equality Act. For anyone who doesn't already know, the current state of non-discrimination protections is that you are more or less protected depending on where you live. Your rights literally depend on your zip code, which is absurd. I mean, for example, where I'm from, my hometown is Florida, and as we mentioned, Florida is the latest state to pass one of these sports bills. Well, in Florida has no statewide protections against discrimination, but a lot of cities and counties do. So you could live in one city and be protected in some parts of your life there. But then when you commute to work in another city, you're not protected for the same kinds of things. That's completely unsustainable. It's completely unfair. So right now we have this patchwork, and the solution to that is to pass a federal bill, is to do something that is national, to make it neat and clean and simple in explicit black and white terms at the federal level, that trans people, you cannot discriminate against people just for being trans. The Equality Act is the simple solution to this. I mean, it would upgrade all of our non-discrimination protections to cover virtually every part of daily life. We have employment protections secure definitively thanks to the Bostock Supreme Court decision last summer. And legally, a lot of that extends to healthcare and education. But we still need the Equality Act to cover things like public spaces. The legal term for that is public accommodations. And you can kind of think of it as everywhere you go in your daily life other than work, school, or a place of worship. Obviously really essential. It covers things like parks and stores and movie theaters. And we know for a fact that these are a lot of these places where trans people get turned away. So the Equality Act would fix that. It would just make it completely clear in black and white terms that you are not allowed to discriminate against trans people. It's in the Senate right now. It already passed out of the House, so now we got to win it in the Senate. And this is really timely. So if you're interested in helping out, sign up for a phone bank, write your senator. No matter where you live, your senator needs to hear from you. So you might live in Virginia or Maryland and think that, my senator's fine. Call them. It does not matter who your senator is. The opposition is funneling phone calls in all the time. And so it's on us to fight that back, to send in just as many phone calls to show that the majority of folks are on our side. So call your senator. And if you're down a phone bank, you can go to NCT's website. It's transequality.org. We phone bank every Monday night. A lot of the other groups on this webinar are doing a lot of other things on the Equality Act as well. So check out all our websites, plenty to do to get involved. And then we can finally pass this thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
I cannot, hear a plea to call senators without reminding folks that people who live in the district do not have senators. And if we did, chances are there'd be an Equality Act. Chances are there wouldn't be a Brett Kavanaugh. If we had senators, a lot of these problems that we're talking about would be not quite as dramatic. The lack of the Equality Act, immigration reform, filibuster reform, voting rights. So DC's liberation is just as central to what we're talking about here today as anything else. And I'm not trying to, scold you there, Rodrigo. Not at all.
No, it's a good point. Yeah, it's true. And so if you live in DC, all the more reason to phone bank so you can recruit somebody else to call in, but also support DC statehood.
Who do I call?
I love it.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I should clarify. You can call other people in the target states to get them to call their senator.
Oh, got it.
So go through that list of Facebook friends and see where everyone lives. And now's the time to send people a message. Hey, I haven't spoken to you in 10 years. I need you to call your senators. I love it. We're going to switch gears a little bit. We've got some questions from the audience. I'm going to change a couple things up on my screen. So participants, if you want to raise your little yellow participant hand, we'll see if we can call on you. You can ask your question directly. We did have a question come in via the chat, and this is for Andrea. Andrea, we see through the film this really incredible relationship and friendship with Terry. And Terry even talks about in the film her courage to come out and run as a trans woman because of your visibility and your resilience in doing it. So we'd love to hear what that means to you. How does it feel to be the visibility for someone else and give them the courage to be themselves? I will stop talking. This is you.
Honestly, it was everything to me. I remember Terry had reached out to me, I think, a little before our sophomore year. So my freshman year, I remember just being very lonely and not really having anyone which I could kind of relate to and kind of, talk to about kind of what I was going through with trauma as well. But once Terry came out, and we started running together. Then we talked to each other about everything. Specifically what we were going through, like the petitions, the lawsuits, things of the sort. But it was just great to have her there and to have someone I could kind of confide in and be like, hey, this is bothering me. I talked to you about it, and we were able to really relate to each other on a deeper level because we were the only two trans runners in Connecticut. But yeah, it meant everything to me.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. We've got one more question coming in from the chat. Again, folks, if you want to ask your questions directly in the chat, you can go ahead and do that. You can send them to me directly, or you can raise your participant hand and we'll go ahead and call on you. But this might be an Anne question. This is a quote. Someone has a friend that identifies as gay and thinks that trans folks shouldn't be able to compete with men or women as there's a different makeup of body type and strength that's not a level playing field. How do we approach this topic with a friend? And period, question mark.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are having these conversations on some level with folks in maybe our immediate families or communities. And it sounds also like from this person's question that there's some push for a third category. That's what it sounds like a little bit for trans folks. And we've heard that proposed before, not only for trans folks, but I think we know from American history that separate is never equal. And it's really important to understand that trans people, especially trans kids, play sports for the same reasons that any of us play sports. And it's what we've already all spoken about on the panel today, which is for camaraderie, feeling embodied, being part of a team, and that these conversations about competitive advantage and leveling the playing field, again, are not founded in any empirical evidence. We know this from the lawmakers, we know this from the science and the data. we don't have time to get into all of that, but if anybody wants to talk to me offline about testosterone and competitive advantage, would love to do it. But really, we have to hone in on what we're really talking about. And we're talking about kids who want to play sports with their friends. And we have to bring it back to the reality of the situation, not conversations that happen in theory or are not based in fact.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne. That's a succinct answer to a difficult question. Absolutely. And one of my favorite books to recommend to folks too is Katrina Karkazis's book about testosterone, which is betwixt my cookbooks. Oh, look, you have a copy too. But Katrina does a really great job discussing testosterone and frankly, a lot of the myths about hormones and the roles they play, the role hormones play in sport performance. Sasha.
Can I just make one point, and that is that what's sometimes, I think that it's intentionally abused to some degree, but I think that it's important to underscore that the bills that are being passed or introduced aren't based on testosterone. They're bills that would categorically exclude trans kids from ever participating, period.
And if I could add one more thing to that, I think it's also good to bring up when you're talking with someone who's ambivalent or not supportive yet, that these bans on trans youth playing sports are bans on trans youth. These are largely K through 12 schools, kindergarten to 12th grade. Some of them include college, but the point is, these are not professional athletes. We are not talking about the rules of who can play in the NFL with $1 million+ salary. We're talking about young people who are just trying to go to school and compete like anybody else. I mean, these are minors, and we're cutting people off from really formative opportunities in the middle school and high school years. So I think, there's sometimes when someone's on the fence or not supportive yet on this issue of trans people in sports, they're thinking of like a really high advanced level of competition, or maybe even like the Olympics or something. And it can be good to kind of refocus it on, hey, this is middle school and high school. Like, do you remember what it was like to be that age? And do you remember how important it was to feel accepted at that time? So refocusing on the fact that these are youth, not, advanced professional athletes for the most part.
I think that's a good point, because sports culture, which in many places is absolutely sick, reinforces that. Everybody thinks that their kid is gonna get a scholarship. Everybody thinks that their kid is going to be the next one to go to the majors. Why do people who make $28,000 a year oppose a tax on billionaires? Because they think that someday they're going to be a billionaire. My daughter's in the process of trying to make a college baseball team. Not trying to get a scholarship, not trying to do anything other than make a team. And 7% of high school baseball players become college baseball players. The numbers are daunting. And where would she have been this year where she couldn't go to school, where she couldn't go and see her friends, if she couldn't get outside and play baseball? We're talking about kids. And most of the kids are out there to get some fresh air, to see their friends, to have some fun. And it's not as serious as the adults want it to be. And the intersection of that sort of sick sports culture with the anti-trans bias, I think, is part of what's going on here.
Yeah, these are all great points, and thank you so much, Ava, for bringing up student athletes. I played college ice hockey, and as a student athlete, the student part comes first. And so not only was I trying to get recruited for playing hockey, but I had to be a good student. And when we're talking about student athletes, there's also a huge component of the athletics don't make the experience, right? And so as people try to compete, so I appreciated that reframe. Andrea, Ava mentioned camaraderie, and we've been talking about this quite a bit. What has it been like? You know, we see it in the film, you have this great relationship with some of your teammates. So what has it been like to be out as a trans athlete and the people that you're on teams with? How's that reception been for you?
Yeah, I think overall it's been very smooth. I remember kind of in the beginning of my transition, my freshman year, I mean, even that very first practice, that very first track meet, no one had treated me any differently than anybody else on the team. Everyone was just very accepting, didn't really, again, like just question, you know, why I was there, why I was on the team. People just acted as if I was any other sprinter. And I mean, I think that, I mean, it really helps for me to like continue to run track and continue to play the sport that I love, especially with all the attention kind of in the media and all the negativity through legislation. But I think one very important part that I kind of hold dear to my heart was one, I was in my junior year of high school, I think spring semester, yeah. And I was actually considering like not running track anymore and kind of just focusing on getting ready for college, just kind of closing the chapter of track like in my life, kind of closing it early. Um, and I guess in part that was kind of due to what I had gone through throughout media and kind of all the negativity that I'd gone through the past 3 years. I just didn't know if I wanted to go through that for a whole other year. But I once had a conversation with my friends, and they were kind of telling me like, you know, why I should continue to run track, and kind of how I shouldn't let what other people say over like the internet dictate, you know, whether I participate in sports I love and whether I just kind of have fun with my last year of high school. And they were there kind of being like, you know, we're always here for you. If you need anything, you can always come to us. And I mean, I say all that to say that they were just a huge reason as to why I continued to play the sport and why my overall transition did go a lot smoothly.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Is your friend group accepting applications or not so much?
So I'll let them know.
Thank you. That's a really great closing point as we are coming up on time to talk about allyship and support. And this theme is interwoven throughout our conversation tonight. And we've talked about ways to get involved. But I want to make sure that we're leaving audience members with one tangible action step or thing they can do after this panel to support trans athletes, trans youth, to create safer and more affirming spaces for trans people, trans youth all across the country. And so I would love to hear a brief action step, tangible something that you're excited about. Andrea, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think one that can be kind of tough at times, just kind of, well, one, like to further educate yourself on the trans community and on trans people in sports. And then kind of once you have that education, kind of spreading it in your immediate communities and like again, like your friends, families, things like that. Because I know that it can be kind of hard if like someone were to say something maybe that wasn't like the nicest, kind of like correcting them, that can kind of difficult as well. But I think just making sure you do the little things that count as well and just continue to have those conversations.
I love that. Thank you. It's the little things. Rigo, you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll repeat my plug about the Equality Act because that would extend so many protections that could ultimately preempt a lot of these bad bills. The youth medical bans and the youth sports bans. It would really give us a lot of leverage to fight these attacks on the state level in places that that are still running these hostile attacks. So again, there's phone banks every single night of the week, and these phone banks are to call people who live in target states. So you can sign up to phone bank from anywhere, all 50 states, DC, all the territories. You can sign up to phone bank and call people who live in other places to get them to call their senator. And we also have texting versions of it too. If you're like, I don't want to talk on the phone, I get it. We have text banks as well, where you just do it from your cell phone. So transequality.org on the homepage is a big Equality Act image, and you can sign up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ava, what's your one thing you want folks to leave with?
I'm going to echo all the political advocacy that's out there. This morning, I learned that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in an immigration case and denied immigrants a tremendous benefit. So it reminded me that we can't always rely on the courts to help us, that we have to win these battles politically. We have to cast these folks into the part of history that they belong to. And so I would echo all that. I would also say, come out and watch a girls' baseball game. We have a week-long tournament in Aberdeen, Maryland, this summer, and if you've never, you'll see excellent baseball and a level of camaraderie and joy just for being among a group of girls that all love the same thing, where they don't have to be the only girl out there. It will change your life, I promise.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sasha.
I've got three. I'll make them quick. One is, if you hear, support trans kids. If you hear something transphobic or people are going after trans kids, please step in and interrupt. Number two, if you're trans or non-binary, please play, please participate. Team DC has such a great menu of options, whether it's darts, softball, whatever you got, whatever you want, just participate, because it's so important and so healthy. Number three, this is like something I've been thinking about with the state legislative attacks, that people don't pay enough attention to state legislators and city council members. They, only the people that the far right does, we don't. So my assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to just find out who your city council member is or your state legislator. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Anne.
Oh, such good action items. So on our end, please follow Athlete Ally on social media. Our communications director, Joanna Hoffman, is amazing, and she does so much amazing work to uplift trans voices and trans stories all throughout the year. Follow trans athletes on social media. Our dear friend and colleague, Chris Mosier, who's also a trans athlete and a very high level athlete. Follow Chris on social media. Chris has amazing action alerts. And I want to add to something that Ava said about women's sports. One of the things we've been hearing over and over again is how these laws protect women's sports. And those of us who've been fans of women's sports or playing women's sports for years know that there are actual challenges to women's sports, like equal pay, like lack of women leadership and coaching, lack of sponsorship opportunities. So if you really want to focus the conversation on supporting women and girls in sports, and that's inclusive of trans women and girls, support women's sports and drown out this rhetoric that we protect women's sports by excluding trans women and girls.
Thank you all so much for these incredible tangible action items. We're going to send out a follow-up email probably tomorrow with these action items recapped, so you can jump out, go ahead and do these things, sign up for everything. The last thing I want to add is a thing you can do is donate and support these incredible organizations that are represented here today. So Lambda Legal, NCTE, Athlete Ally, Team DC. These are all organizations who are doing really incredible work in front of the scenes and behind the scenes to make the world a better, safer place for trans athletes and trans youth. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for this fantastic conversation, especially because we were able to center so many wonderful trans voices on this panel of experts. Trans representation and visibility, especially when we're telling our own stories about joy, success, and resilience, is an act of resistance and tells other trans people that they too deserve love and joy. So a big thank you to Team DC, NCTE, Lambda Legal, Athlete Ally, and Hulu for prioritizing conversations about transgender inclusion by centering transgender people. And of course, a big thank you to our game-changing panelists, Andrea, Anne, Ava, Rigo, and Sasha. Changing the Game is officially on Hulu as an original documentary and part of Hulu's Pride Month celebration. I encourage everyone to not only see the film, but to continue to take action to support our trans community. Have a happy and safe Pride Month. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.